Broke up with my girl over the phone from a booth outside of Waco, Texas. We both couldn't make the distance work, and there wasn't that much to connect us. But moving on. Last night's gig went quite well. Folks dropped a lot of tips in my case, so I thought I'd cheer myself up by going to the smokehouse place. At the side of the room I sat down in my seat and decided to order the brisket. When my waitress arrived, it looked like she'd been crying. When someone's crying, I try to do what I can to fix it. The problem is the room was very smoky. There were a lot of smokers for a restaurant of its size, so I wasn't sure if the waitress was sad and crying, or if the smoke's what made the sadness in her eyes. I tried to find out what I could without being too obvious. I said, "Darling, how's your shift going tonight?" Her response didn't give too much away, no. She just replied in a neutral tone, "Alright." I tried again and said this room was very smoky. If you're around it a lot, your eyes must hurt a bit. She replied, "You'd be surprised what a person can get used to. Sir, would you like a side along with your brisket?" The problem is the room was very smoky. There were a lot of smokers for a restaurant of its size, so I wasn't sure if the waitress was sad and crying, or if the smoke's what made the sadness in her eyes. When I was finished, I got up to leave, and the waitress noticed my guitar. While I was eating, I'd stashed it under the table. The waitress told me she's got a few songs of her own. She'd go on the road to play them if she were able. She admitted nothing in life was tying her down. In this town she hadn't made a single connection. When her shift is over, she goes back to a lonely apartment, plays her guitar and wishes she were heading out in any direction, doesn't matter which one. The problem is the room was very smoky. There were a lot of smokers for a restaurant of its size, so I wasn't sure if the waitress was sad and crying, or if the smoke's what made the sadness in her eyes. The waitress told me she cries during her shift, thinking of what could be, but her eyes water anyway because of the smoke. Turns out you really don't get used to it. I said, "If she liked to take a chance with a friendly stranger, she could be my opening act and hit the road." This wasn't a joke. I told her I'd meet her after her shift tonight. When she collected her pay, we'd stop at her apartment to pick up her guitar. We'd go around and play the gigs I'd lined up nearby. I said, "You can get to know me and I can get to know I admit I'd recently been through a breakup, so I was only looking for a friend and nothing more. One motel room doesn't cost extra to put two people in. We take turns sleeping on the bed and sleeping on the floor. But my wife a musician. The problem is the room was very smoky. There were a lot of smokers for a restaurant of its size. So I wasn't sure if the waitress was sad and crying, or if the smoke's what made the sadness in her eyes. It's been half a year now, and we've become a popular musical duo that doesn't have problems booking